Hello and welcome. I am live from Pellam's Wasteland, and today I have got another episode of Pellam's Wasteland Reads for you all, this time covering The Troop by Nick Cutter, which is a horror novel that came out in 2014, based on a sort of cursory overview of Goodreads. It looks like it is Nick Cutter's most popular novel, but it was a nominee for Reader's Favorite Horror in that year, so that's pretty good. Anyway, this is a horror story about a scout troop. I guess they're I don't think they're called Boy Scouts ever in the book, but 14-year-old boys who are all scouts, and their scoutmaster, Dr. Riggs, who is the small town doctor in his day job, but is taking over as, or not taking over, is the scoutmaster for this troop of scouts and is taking the troop out on a wilderness survival weekend, I guess you might say. Not super survivalist, but scout adventures in the great outdoors. All of those characters are from Prince Edward Island, I think is the specific starting. That's where their town is, which is one of the Canadian islands, I guess. Yeah, and one of the Canadian islands, and then Falstaff Island is the island that they go to, which is a small, normally uninhabited island, and has a cabin on it that is stocked up for them. So the idea is to spend essentially a weekend out in the wilderness doing all sorts of scout related survivalist things. Anyway, as you might imagine for a horror story, things don't quite work out as they might have hoped or expected from there. And the setting is interrupted when a man arrives by boat. They have, of course, arrived by boat on an island, and been dropped off and are expected to be picked up at the other end of the weekend. But a man arrives by a boat that has been damaged, and he has some stuff clearly very wrong with him. Is just voraciously hungry and seems to be very ill and seems to be suffering from some amount of mental disturbance and all sorts of bad stuff going on. And so Scoutmaster Riggs is trying to balance his duties as a doctor to try to take care of this man who is clearly having some trouble with his duties as the reigning adult who is in charge of these boys. And as you might imagine, things escalate and get a little out of control. And pretty soon the boys are thrust into a level of decision making and attempts to, um, you know, survive on their own, shall we say. And I don't want to say too much more about everything that happens, because we're getting into spoiler territory very, very quickly. But a lot of what the book is about kind of that issue, the difficulty of being 14, for lack of a better term, the idea of the way that there's a sort of a quality of a way that being a teenager, it can be difficult in the moment to realize just how far from adulthood one is. Certainly, I remember when I was about that age and thinking like, oh yeah, I'm like, pretty much an adult. And then with the greater level of awareness provided by being actually an adult, looking back and thinking, oh no, obviously not. I wasn't basically an adult at 14. I just thought I was because I was 14. And that's part of what this story is about, is the kind of struggles of being a teenager, and especially in more and more chaotic and difficult situations, and trying to reconcile that transitional period between childhood and adulthood. Anyway, The other sort of side of the book is that there's also in between the main chapters, there's sort of a, for lack of a better term, B story that is explaining the background of the things that are going on, and is all basically kind of nonfiction information about all of the things that are sort of relevant to how we got into this situation, and some of kind of in the aftermath of this particular situation, how people have kind of tried to live with what happened and all that sort of stuff. Which is it's an interesting technique. I think for me, it kind of fits at an odd place where, on the one hand, the way that it allows for kind of greater information and awareness of the situation that the boys are going through on the island, in a way that they are, they're not familiar with all of the kind of real dangers, is an interesting way of bringing out that thematic issue of the kind of, the edge of childhood and not being kind of totally aware of all of the kind of the difficulties, and not as familiar with the sort of gritty reality and all that sort of stuff. On the other hand, I think that for many people, there's likely to be a sense of kind of tonal whiplash almost, and a sort of way in which those sequences can be interesting, but they definitely pull you out of the immersion in the kind of A story with the boys on the island. And I don't know. I guess I'll leave it to anyone else reading the book to decide how exactly they feel about those shifts. For me, it wasn't a huge deal, but I could definitely see people feeling like, wait a second, I want to be kind of in the character, in the kind of like intense immersion of the survival on the island, and every time we move a chapter we get pulled out of that, and that could be unsatisfying. Otherwise, I thought the book was pretty good. There's a couple of scenes that I thought were really good. There's a scene about two-thirds of the way through the story where some of the boys, in their attempt to ensure their survival on the island, have decided that they need food. And what they do is they find a sea turtle that has been trapped in a tidal pool, and decide that what they ought to do is butcher the sea turtle in order to get meat, right, to survive on the island. And that scene absolutely rocks. That's, I think, basically the best scene in the entire book. The boys have a really hard time killing the sea turtle, not just the kind of moral implication, but like the physical ability to do what they thought would be a relatively easy task turns out to be a lot more difficult than they expected. And it's really great. It's a really powerful and brutal scene that I think is, like I said, it's one of the best parts of the story. This moment of kind of really intense awareness of the kind of moral issues of what they've done, and the realization of that kind of lack, basically, like I've been talking about, this idea of not being full adults yet, and kind of struggling with that. And I think that scene is maybe one of the best in the book for that particular issue. So I liked that little bit a lot. Some of the other stuff, especially towards the end of the book, I think is unfortunately not quite as good, especially as some of the sort of stakes escalate. I think it's easier to, as we sort of get away from the, I don't know. I'm not entirely sure the best way to put it, but I guess I felt like that the earlier parts of the book, where the stakes were in some ways lower and less kind of sort of obvious immediate issues going on, in some ways were more kind of satisfying, and easier to kind of believe in, less difficult to um, less difficult to kind of see how all the parts fit together and how it made sense. And especially kind of towards the end of the book, there's some kind of just a couple of things that I felt like weren't as satisfying. And therefore it was, you know, not as easy to suspend disbelief basically towards the end. But that's okay. That's not a huge deal. Um, Ultimately, yeah, I thought this was pretty good. Probably not my favorite horror story, to be honest, but pretty good, pretty easy read, I will say. My version on Kindle, it was something I don't remember, like 400 or 50, 500 pages, and it was real easy read. So, um, that, if you're looking for something like that, that is definitely moving pretty quickly and keeping things going, that's a good, this one I think will fit that type of exciting and intense kind of horror elements. A lot of body horror in this one. I guess I didn't specifically talk about that, but there is a lot of body horror stuff in here, and the body horror stuff is great. It's fun and weird and all sorts of nasty twisting and all sorts of kind of strange slimy stuff. And those parts of it, I think if you like body horror, you will like that part of this story. Anyway, I guess what I will say as a sort of conclusion to this is that I thought it was all right. I suspect that the opinion about the book of most readers probably won't change very much over the course of the book. That if you read, the first 20 pages and think, oh, this seems like it'll be fun and interesting, you will probably continue to like, especially by like page 100, right? If you're like a fifth of the way into the book, you probably know, broadly speaking, a lot of what you're in for in terms of kind of tone and style and all that sort of stuff. And um, so if you get to that point and are not really feeling it, I wouldn't hesitate to say like, this is not for me. And if you are feeling it, you might as well read to the end because you'll probably like all of the rest of it. And I think that's more so than some of the other books on here. I think that's a kind of a way to think about this particular one that, like I said, if you like the first parts of it, you'll probably like the whole thing. If you don't, you probably won't. And yeah, but if you do like it, or if you don't, I guess if you don't like it, or if you do like it, let me know in the comments. If you have some other related things that you want to talk about or want me to read and review or whatever else, feel free to put that down there. Otherwise, that's going to be it for me for today. I will just say thank you so much for watching or listening. I've been live from Pellan's Wasteland, and I will see you next time. Take care, everybody.